Hey, it's Kyle here, and I'm currently looking back at the favorite books I read in 2016. I'm doing this in two videos, my favorite fiction books of 2016 and my favorite non-fiction books of 2016. If you did see my fiction video, I'll put the link in the description box below. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about my 5 favorite non-fiction books that I read in 2016. So first up, the number 5 spot is The Squared Circle, Life, Death, and Professional Wrestling by David Shoemaker. So first off, I'll say I'm not sure how much you'll enjoy this book if you don't have at least some sort of interest in professional wrestling. Either you still kind of enjoy it, or maybe you watched it when you were younger. But this book is a very fascinating look at the origins of professional wrestling, how it's developed from the 50s to 60s, where it's more of a territorial type thing, to today's professional wrestling, where it is a worldwide thing under the WWE. But it's a very fascinating look at this industry and the history behind it and how it came about, and it's a very interesting look. I'm not a diehard professional wrestling fan. I would very much describe myself as something casual, like I'll watch it when there's nothing else on that night, and kind of casually stay in touch with it. But I really enjoyed this book a lot. I thought it was very fascinating. I really enjoyed the historical look into how this industry developed into what it is today. So, The Squared Circle by David Shoemaker is a very, 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 very good book. So if you have some interest in professional wrestling, or definitely if you have a lot of interest in professional wrestling, I'd strongly encourage you to check this book out. Next up, the number 4 slot is Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell. I never read any of Sarah's books, but I was familiar with her in the past from seeing her appear on The Daily Show, and I always found her appearances very funny, and I always found like her books were very interesting, but for some reason I just never picked one up. And then I was at a Friends of the Library book sale, and this book happened to be one of the ones there, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting, and I'll check it out. I know the author had always sounded interesting to me, and there's an interesting concept, and basically the idea is she's kind of exploring the history of presidential assassinations in America, and how all these kind of historical sites and elements have kind of popped up around it, and the myth that kind of builds up when a president's assassinated. So she visits all these sites associated with them, from presidential houses and museums to the actual sites where the presidents were assassinated, and she kind of does it as like a road trip vacation. So you get a lot of humor, but at the same time it really delves into some interesting aspects of American history. So I really enjoyed Assassination Vacation. Next up, number 3 slot is Rebel Yell, The Violence, Passion, and Redemption of Stonewall Jackson by S.C. Gwynne. As anybody as a fan of this channel knows, I'm really into history, and definitely one of my favorite subjects in history is the American Civil War. I've read a ton of books about it, and probably the individual in the Civil War that I find the most fascinating is Stonewall Jackson. I've read several books about him, so when a new book came out about him, I was very excited to read it. This is not my favorite book about Stonewall Jackson, but I still really enjoyed the book. It delved into some interesting aspects of his life and the Civil War in general. So if you have an interest in American history, even if you haven't really done much studying about the Civil War, I'd strongly encourage you to check this out. If you are a Civil War fan and you really enjoy delving into the history of the Civil War, I'd really encourage you to check out this book. Rebel Yell is a very, very good book about the Civil War. Just check it out. And my second favorite book, non-fiction book for 2016, is The Art of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. This book is awesome. I've done a video about this on my channel before, so I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But it basically goes into all the concept art about The Force Awakens and how the art developed as the process. Sorry, I'm trying to flip the book and it's not cooperating, so let me just put the cover off. I think it'll be a little bit easier. But it explores kind of like the process of creating the art, which helped develop the story and the costume design and character design for the movie, and how that changed as the development of the movie progressed. So I think it's a fascinating look about how the movie was made, how the storyline came about, Like, it kind of gives you some insight on what the people that are putting the movie together were thinking, and possibly what that means for episode 8 and 9, because you kind of see how the character designs and stuff change over time, and they changed a lot. And the artwork in this is absolutely beautiful. So if you're a Star Wars fan, I would definitely encourage you to check out the art of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It is absolutely fascinating and beautiful book. So definitely read that. And my favorite book that I read in 2016, at least in nonfiction, is The Guns of August by Barbara W. Tuchman. This is a kind of a look at the first month of World War I, of basically the events that transpired, the days leading up to the start of the war, to actually the first few weeks of the war, and how actions taken by both sides ensured it turned into the quagmire it was and lasted for several years and costed millions and millions of lives. It's a very, very interesting look at how, like, if a few small little decisions had been done differently, from a commander in the field to one of the leaders of the nations in the war, if they had just made a few tiny different decisions, how the war could have possibly been over in just a couple of weeks, not been the several-year-long war that devastated Europe, which is even more fascinating because as she explores in the end of the book, how the events of World War I basically led to World War II. So if you think, like, if World War I had not been as long and been over in a month or two, maybe World War II would have never happened, and then you don't have the rise of the Nazis and the Cold War and all the stuff that came out of that. So it's a very interesting book. She does a great job exploring the personalities involved in the war. It's not only was this my favorite nonfiction book I read in 2016, it quickly became one of my favorite nonfiction books I have ever read. So strongly encourage you to check out The Guns of August. So those are my 5 favorite nonfiction books that I read in 2016. Let me know in the comment section below what your favorite nonfiction book was that you read in 2016. Be sure to like this video if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel. Hope you enjoyed this video, and happy reading.